Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Advancement Podcast. Hey, if you enjoyed this podcast, could you subscribe, or you can rate us on whatever, podcasting network that you listen to us.
Can they subscribe and rate us?
Yeah, I'd prefer if they do both, but we're not scripted here at the Advancement Podcast, so it's not perfect. And this is our 15th podcast of the day, so my mouth is getting tired. But we're also on Facebook and YouTube, and you can go and check out what we're all about at advancement.cc. I'm joined today by the incomparable, dynamic Timothy Dominic Ware.
Well, Ronnie Todd, it's so good to be here with you.
It's awesome. My mom will be glad you're using my full name. My mom's a big fan. She's a big listener. So,
well, there you go, Mama. Ronnie Todd in the house today. Yep, sunshiny outside. Good day to be here as we get ready to reopen. When this podcast's out, some of you've already been in church for a couple of weeks, and some are trying to figure out how to reopen and when you're going to reopen. And so we're excited that today we're taking a little different approach. This is part 2 of a series. We're taking a little bit of a different approach with the podcast, trying to do a roundtable with a group of local pastors to see how they can not only cooperate together as well as work in their individual congregations and responding to challenges in this reopening. And really, we're looking at the challenges regarding connecting to those who are outside the church. Pastor Jerry Cox is with us from Crossroads Church there in Cleburne, Texas, and has his 11-year-old granddaughter living with him. He's a homeschooler now. We have Pastor Eddie Sheeler from Ascension Church there in Cleburne, Texas, and he also pastors the Next Gen Preschool. And how's life in the country? Because you live just outside of town.
Since we've been together last, Tim, we've moved from almost in Glen Rose to just outside of Cleburne. So we're a little closer to town on a little less acreage in a house that was just built out there in a new subdivision. So
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Grieves the country boy.
It does grieve. I am grieving. Todd, when you mentioned the Land and Rising Star, I'm gonna sign up to be a guide or a chaplain or whatever.
Then we have with us Pastor Kenny Rigolo of the United Presbyterian Church there in Cleburne, and you've got 3 kids, 2 sons and a daughter, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
How is homeschooling going? Now, your wife's a teacher already, though.
Yes, my wife is a preschool teacher at Coleman Elementary School, and she is doing a fantastic job staying in touch with her kids and teaching online. And our 3 are thankfully old enough to do quite a bit of their schoolwork on their own. I did have to help my daughter with some percentages this morning, but I still remember how to do an 18% tip, so that was so it was good. So we're making the most of our time together, doing home and family and school and work all in the same place.
Yeah, man. Sounds like fun. Sounds like fun. Hey guys, I'm so thankful you guys are with us. Last time we kind of talked about the perception challenge that is out there with people outside the church and churches reopening. And we talked about the fact that we can't control that. We can't control how they feel, but we can manage our communication and do our best to communicate to them. And really talked about the cooperative effort of supporting each other, because one church is going to open and one's going to do it different, and being in support of each other. As we look at this circumstance, and over the last few weeks, the things we've learned from the experts we had in with us, there's a couple of things that are laying out there that we've seen everybody talk about. And one is that when people couldn't go out, there's been a coming together in local neighborhoods. People did not always know their neighbors because they were too busy. They could wave at them, but they didn't really know them. And as Dr. Susie told us a couple of episodes ago, that kids are their kids are connecting, and now people are getting to know each other. They're getting to know their neighbors more than just that's the Sheelers that live across the street. There's something more because we're a neighborhood now. And I'd love for us to take this conversation and talk about the fact that we're knowing the people right around us. And so often in our churches, our evangelism has become about big events, and we've let the neighbors with the best way I know to say it is we've ignored our neighbors for the sake of somebody else. And have been unconcerned if they knew Jesus or not. And that's a broad statement, but it's true across the country. And statistics tell us that relational evangelism is still the best evangelism method out there. So let's just brainstorm for a while, and let's stir up ideas in our listeners. If we think about the fact that our churches, our people are getting closer to their immediate neighbors than they may have been in years, how can we help our congregations use that deepening, fresh, new relationship to expand the gospel and expand the kingdom?
Well, I think, Tim, this just showed us how important community is, and that we cannot do what we do by ourselves. I mean, it takes the grocery workers that are stocking the shelves nonstop. It takes the all the essential workers that we see doing the different things, from the firefighters to the police officers. I think this gives us a greater appreciation for our community. And I think this is just something that we as church leaders can build off of, that, understanding that every aspect of our community is important. And as the church, we are called to reach out and be relational with each one of those community. And it helps us get a deeper sense of that. For all intents and purposes, we had really become isolationists. And now we're learning that we're not as isolated as we thought we were, and how much we need each other in all this.
Tim, where we were pretty spread out in our development that we were in Glenrose. We're about as equally spread out, and I've met a few of the neighbors around us. So I haven't personally witnessed, kids playing together or being out in the street, although I have no doubt that that's happening. But there's a formula that I've been passing on to my people for a couple of years, even way before COVID-19, that I hope and pray COVID-19 will help accelerate. That unhurried time plus conversation multiplied over time equals relationships. It's just kind of a simple formula for friendship, but who said it a while ago? We're isolationists. We're in too big of a hurry to have the unhurried time. And so now we're kind of being forced to have that unhurried time.
Would you give that formula again?
Yeah, I sure will, because I think it's very helpful for us and for our people. Unhurried time plus conversation. We got to talk. But if it's just, you can talk about anything. You can talk about the weather. You can talk about sports. You can talk about anything. But unhurried time plus conversation multiplied over time is going to equal those relationships. And y'all know as well as I do, that conversation that started about hunting, Tim, how many times has it happened that after you've talked about a few of those stories, it turns into, well, the Lord was really watching over us on this trip. I get chill bumps when I think about that. Then that conversation that spawned out of the unheard time over time resulted in a spiritual conversation and even a conversion as a result of that formula.
I think that's a great thing, because we have lived in such a hurried society, and people right now have been slowed down. Dr. Mackinich, Dr. Nicole Mackinich, in one of our previous episodes, talked about the fact that we've been a hurried society, we've been slowed down, and there's the question of how fast are people going to rush back to a fast lifestyle once things open up, which is actually a great question for us to possibly dive into, is how do we help the people in our church keep their priorities in place so that let's use your phrase, Eddie, that they are able to retain some unhurried time to build relationships for the sake of reaching people for Christ.
Yeah, that is the end result.
Yeah. So how can we do that? Because now, Todd, you talked in the broader context of the large community, but in the context of a neighborhood, how can we help our people apply the formula?
If you just want a short answer, which I don't know if I'm too good at giving, but I'll try.
Preacher's problem.
We started last year. We started going back into the neighborhoods with monthly prayer walks. And so we can use this time, we can make of this time that we've been given what we want out of it. It can either be a restart, which I hope it is for a lot of people, that we see we don't need sports to occupy our time. We don't need movies to occupy our time. We don't need to go to occupy our time. We can actually spend time at home, and we can spend time in relationship with one another. Or it can be a waste of time, and I hope it hasn't been that. But we started going back into prayer walk, so it's actually encouraging to hear that the reestablishment of the neighborhood, because we really want to be, we see, especially Texas, if you're going to do it in Texas, you got to do it big. So if you're going to have a church in Texas, it's got to be a mega church, right?
Yeah.
It's got to reach
the
whole world. But Jesus said, you're going to be my witnesses first in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And so what we would like to do, and what we've been doing, is focusing on our neighborhood and just being a neighborhood church. So if the neighborhood's getting back together, then we have an opportunity of interweaving ourselves whatever neighborhood we've been placed. We haven't been placed there by mistake. God knows where we're supposed to be. So if we can interweave ourselves into that neighborhood, that'll have a better impact, I think, than anything else that we can do coming out of this. Because as that new normal becomes the way of life, the prayer is that we become part of that new normal for the neighborhood.
So what are the methods there that you use to become integrated into the neighborhood? Prayer walks one. What are the other things that we do in these neighborhood contexts that will accentuate the relationships for the gospel, accentuate the presence of Christ? If people are gathering and focusing inward, and especially since these are people that don't know Christ, are still making these inward looks to their local neighborhood community, what are the methods that we can use to push out and begin to impact them and connect deeper and present the gospel?
Well, I have the advantage because I was on our last episodes, so I know what the sociologist said. And she really pushed us.
You also have 4 kids of under 8 that are all cute that everybody wants to come see when you take a walk.
Sure. But what she said didn't really have to do with my 4 kids. It had to do with, she was saying that a lot of the people that we're going to reach will begin, yes, we'll reach them relationally, but they will begin to check out our churches through the online ways that we're already offering, and that we should not stop that just because we're going to focused meeting groups, because those are a way that those that may not necessarily walk through the doors of our church initially will see our church and come to our church. But I think community helps that, because when I'm out there talking to people, I can say, hey, go check out our church. It's not, hey, come to our church. They can go online and check out our church before they even walk in the doors. And I think that helps.
Well, I guess I'm not asking the question well
Now,
here.
See if this helps, Tim, because I think you can combine a couple things, and this is somewhat brainstorming as well. But I always jump way ahead, and sometimes people follow, sometimes they don't. One of the specific things in that regard was a challenge to my people, based on that formula that I shared, to get to know 5 of your neighbors. I had them draw a map. Here's your house. Here's your 5 closest neighbors, whatever that logistics looks like in your neighborhood. And by the 1st of next month, your homework as a result of this message of being witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, is to know the names and the prayer needs of people, the 5 people closest to you, and send them out. And, I didn't collect the homework. I'm not that good of a teacher, and I'm not sure how much they did it. But Jerry, what if we started with the prayer walks, and now you've got, 10, 12, 15 people walking with you in the neighborhood? And after we finish that, say, okay, now you go to your neighborhood, and all 15 of you go do what we've did, and the multiplication starts to look first century after that, really, that they're already strategically placed in the neighborhoods where Jesus already is. So let's just join him out there. I've got to process that for my people. It'll be a backup for us because we haven't done any prayer walking here. I didn't really show the people how to do it. I told them and expected them to have perfect retention and perfect application.
So this is what we did on our prayer walks, and that was the intention. Believe it or not, the intention was actually more for our people than the neighborhood. We wanted to reach out to the neighborhood, but our kids came back from their mission trip from New Orleans last year, and they had went on a prayer walk. And the way that we do prayer walks is we go to door. We knock on the door and ask them if we can pray for them, and ask them if we can, talk with them. We're not there necessarily to share the gospel, but just to pray with them if they have any needs. And that taught our people exactly what you're talking about. That teaches our people that it's not scary to pray with people. That you can meet up with somebody and say, hey, can I pray for you for whatever? And that people aren't going to jump on you and hit you because you asked them to pray for them.
Not usually.
Right, not usually. And so it gave them the confidence, and it gave them the ability and experience to go out and actually interact with people on a faith-based platform, which is different than what it was before.
We just don't stand right now. We just don't stand on their front porch to do it. We let them stand their doorway. We stand back a little bit.
Yeah,
that's right. Well,
social distance.
That's why we had to stop. Was because we didn't want, especially when all this was breaking loose, we didn't want 10 people or 6 people knocking on the door and them answering the door with a whole horde of people standing around them.
So I'm hearing those are a couple of good things. I wonder about when we start building these relationships, we also discover their needs.
Yes.
Then we discover if they're a high risk person, if they're an at-risk case, if they lost their job, because everybody's staying home. You don't know who's working from home inside and who's at home because they can't go to work. They don't have a job to go to. So I think we discover some of those things. We discover practical needs, because what I think the temptation for the church is, as soon as the church opens, I can go back to church and I can be back with my people, back with the believers, back with my community, and I can just ignore these people again real quick. And so how do we keep them engaged in this harvest field as we reopen?
Well, I think part of it is I don't think our communities are just going to bounce back quickly from this. I mean, people are going to still have needs. People are going to still need help. And so focusing our community on that will be helpful. We'll have those people that are shut-ins that now have to remain as shut-ins because they're over the age and they're not really supposed to be leaving their house. You know, our community can reach out to those type of people. But, you know, I think what we've got to force our people to understand is remind them of the time that they were in the quarantine and how important connections were to them and how important talking to people and taking time and not being rushed and being around other people, helping them understand that that's the key to all relationships. And moving forward, we need to manage being so busy that we don't have time to reach out to people that need Jesus in their life. Let's take a moment and hear a word about advancement.
Do you feel like your church is stuck in a rut? Then we've got the answer for you here at Advancement. Do you need some personal coaching or maybe some leadership coaching? We can help you out. Contact the Advancement team at info@advancement.cc or check out the website at advancement.cc.
Now let's get back to the podcast.
So before all of this hit, I started reading a book called Make Time. And then this
Divine.
time to finish reading the book.
Who's the book by?
Don't ask me that. I'll give it to you for your show notes. But
he hasn't made enough time to figure that out.
it's two authors that work together to write the book. It's a good book. Make Time, but it talks about trying to find a highlight for your day and not just making your day a bunch of to-do lists, little things to knock out, or big picture goals for 5-year plans, and then wondering where your day went. But really being intentional about setting up a highlight for your day and trying to make sure it happens, whether it's personal or familial or relational or spiritual or work related. But all that to say, I was thinking about, okay, how do I make use of my time? And then I had more time than I've had in ages, right? Many people are trying to find out what they want to do with their time so much that they fill it with, Tiger King on Netflix. But I think we need to be real intentional about encouraging folks as we start to ease our way back into a more regular rhythm and routine. What of those pieces do we not want to put back? And
yes.
What are those things that took up our time before? That we don't need to watch every college football game on Saturday, right? Or we don't need to do this. And so try to remove some of those things that are time suckers and replace them with time in prayer, in scripture, connecting with our neighbors. And you said it, Tim, relational evangelism is still the best form of evangelism. And so making sure that you make genuine, authentic relationships by spending time in conversation, in unhurried time, over time, as Eddie laid out, is how we're going to share our faith in a way that is authentic and genuine, and not make them feel like they're a project, not make them feel like, I'm just sharing Jesus because my pastor told me that's what I'm supposed to do. And so I'm going to try to win you for Christ and then move on to the next person.
You're just a drive-by.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think the importance there, Kenny, is what you're saying, the reality is, if I build relationship, then it eliminates the ability for the drive-by, because I come to care about you.
Not care.
Exactly.
And when I care, now it matters.
Right.
And so, which is why relational evangelism works, because now you're not just the old school stand on the corner preacher guy.
Right.
I thought of a book that I read. I reread during this time. It's called Essentialism: the Power of Less, by a guy named Greg McCown, because it's the same thing. We have to learn to say no. The more we can say no to, the more we have time to do what's important. But so, Kenny, that brings up a good point. Let's just dig in there a minute for our congregations, because it will affect their gospel, their ability to reach the lost. How can we help people help the people in our church process the what we need to go back to? Right now, everything's been cut off. How do you evaluate what was really important and what you don't need to go back to, so that you have space for evangelism in your life? How do we help them identify what's the priorities and what was just, in your phrase, a time sucker?
I think writing things down makes it real. There's power in writing something down. So writing down the things that you felt brought you closer to God, closer to family, friends, neighbors, and were life-giving are the things you want to maintain. And the things that are life-draining, I discovered that there are some things I'm not going to put back into my regular routine when I can. There are going to be some commitments that I say I'm going to free up my time and free this up for somebody else who's called to this, so that I can focus on the things that God's calling me to do. And so I think we can encourage our congregation and our friends and our folks that are listening, whether they're believers or not, to find those things that are life-giving and hold on to them and make time for them, and share that with folks.
So are you saying that that's the sermon you're going to be preaching, a sermon on that, or are you going to be teaching that in one of your Bible studies?
I think so. I think we'll need to equip our folks and share it. And since now everything's on Facebook or YouTube or Zoom, we can share that with folks beyond our walls at the church.
Well, I think that is a great thing, that if somebody that doesn't know Christ has been overly busy and the anxiety that brings, can hear the same message, to evaluate and not create space in your life, then we've also created space for relationship for them to come and move to faith. Because some people faith doesn't enter into there because they're too busy. So this is creating space for faith also, if we can communicate that. Eddie, you look like you were about to say something.
I thought Todd was about to say something.
Well, Tim, I know we've got a sermon series that we're going to do when we come back. It's mostly about social media, but a lot of it will be about prioritizing and how priorities are very important. And it'll also be about idolatry, putting things in the right place. So it's focused on social media, but I'm sure the spin will have a lot to do with our daily lives, and how it's important to make true connections, not just the connections we make on social media. Social media is a great tool, and I think we've all realized that. At least if we haven't realized it by now, I think this helped us realize it. But I think it's not a great substitute for relational connections, but it can be a bridge to that, but it has to be in its proper place. And that's what we really have got to help our people think through is now we've upped our media consumption. We've upped our social media stuff. And if we up our busyness, then we're not going to have time for anything else. And we're going to have to learn, we're going to have to really fight for a balance when we come back, or we're all going to be snowed over very quickly.
How many parts is the series, Todd?
I've got 5 planned right now.
What if we all did it? Every church you went to in Cleveland's hearing the message about priority.
You're welcome to. We're calling it filtered. So, filtering the right things.
And we're all thinking about it. We're all talking it. We all do it. We'll put our own,
spin on it.
When we do it. But it would be.
If you want it, I'll send you the rundown. We're starting it the Sunday. We're starting it the Sunday after Mother's Day. We're not going to kill everybody on Mother's Day.
Thank you.
So whether or not you're online or not, this is what you're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, because it'll be. It'll work either online or in person. It'll work both ways. I mean, because we're delivering similar content both ways. So it'll work for either space. From here on out, we were before this all happened live stream. We'll continue that, and we'll continue some other things that we've added. So we don't plan on adjusting much other than how do we ramp up in-person meetings is the only thing we're talking about adjusting right now.
So Mother's Day is May 10th. This episode actually is going to come out May 14th. So you will have preached the first series, the first sermon.
Yeah, first message.
Actually, May 17th is when you'll be preaching the first message for this series.
Yeah. So this is the week before we started.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you're listening and you go, that's a great idea. I'd love to see the sermon series, and especially if you guys are all doing it. What we'll do, just send us a message and put a message in the comments, and we'll track that and put your email in there, and we can get that information to you. We can get you that sermon series. So I love the idea, Eddie.
I know. I do too.
Well, I love the idea of the community message too, because that speaks to John 17. It speaks in the last conversation that we had. We talked about supporting each other. If one opens